Let's start at the end, shall we? By the end of this video, you should be able to understand what that glyph is, Saturn, and what this glyph is, Sun, and how those are just like the time on the clock. Now, this is all going to make sense and be very simple. But instead of starting with astrological timing, meaning Saturn over here at 9 and the Sun over here at the 12, we're going to start with the 12 to 24-hour day, meaning the 12-hour clock and the 24-hour day. And then we're going to go into the seasons, the annual seasons, the path of the sun through the zodiac every year. We're going to discuss how that timing is affecting you. So, how it shapes your decisions, your opportunities, your responsibilities, the things that you deal with on a day-to-day basis are very much shaped by the time of day in which you're dealing with things. So, for example, at 6 a.m. through 8 a.m., we could say you get up, you have breakfast, right? And then you get ready for work. So, and then we could say probably from like 9 to 5, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., we know it's time for work, right? Like the office is probably closed at 9 p.m. or 2 a.m. You're probably sleeping, trying to find pancakes at anywhere but IHOP after 2 p.m., the opportunities get thin, right? These are very basic examples, but it's just so easy to understand that the time of day gives us opportunities, shapes what we're doing when, right? If it was 9 a.m. and you couldn't read time back when you were like 4 and you had to ask somebody, let's put the hands on this clock. So there's a big fat hand, that's usually the hour. And then a nice little skinny one, that's usually the minutes. Now, back when you were like 4 and you didn't know what this meant, somebody asked you what the time was, you wouldn't be able to tell them. Just like if I asked you, what does Saturn mean when it's 90 degrees away from your natal sun, meaning where the sun was at the time of your birth and where Saturn is in the sky today, you probably wouldn't be able to tell me what that means, especially if you don't really know what Saturn represents. And maybe you have a vague idea about what your zodiac sign is. What you had to do was somebody had to come in and they had to teach you. They had to say, listen, this big hand represents an hour. And by the time you're like 5, 6, or whatever, when you're beginning to learn time, you have an idea, right? You've had to wait an hour before. You've gotten to play for an hour before. You know what an hour feels like, both when it's like, wow, I can't believe this hour won't end. And you know what an hour feels like when you're like, wow, I can't believe this hour went by so fast. It's really not something that needs much explanation. By the time you start learning time, you're already familiar with how each thing feels. We know that an hour is made up of 60 minutes. We've just decoded what this symbol means. This meant nothing. This was a big fat arrow. This meant nothing. This was a big skinny minute hand. Once we ascribed meaning to them, and then we said, okay, when the hour hand is pointing to 9 and the minute hand is pointing to the 12, that means we've reached the 9 o'clock hour. Every minute is made up of 60 seconds. So we know a minute is 60 seconds. We know an hour is 60 minutes. See how easy that was? See how uncomplicated that is? But see how important it is. If it's 9 a.m. and you're supposed to be at work, well, you need to know that so you're not late, so you're not missing out on money, so you're not missing a meeting. If you're supposed to be picking up your kids at 5 p.m., then you need to know the time so that you can be there, right? Well, it's the same thing astrologically. If we have a planet in a certain geometrical relationship, meaning at one of these areas within the clock, in relationship to another planet, that's our own personal timing. Okay, and let me illustrate. So in this example, this would be the T for transiting Saturn, where Saturn is in the sky today. And here's the sun, where it's always going to be, and it's always been in your natal chart. 90 degrees away from each other, where they've always been, where the sun has always been in your natal chart. Now, just like the day, every year there's certain seasons that determine what we do. In the spring, so at the beginning of 0 degrees Aries, it would be March 21st, about March 21st, 22nd, the 20th. That begins the season of planting seeds, right? The start of an idea, the beginning of something. Every fall, from Libra, September 21st, all the way through Sag, we have the fall, and this is the harvest, right? What we plant here, we harvest here. We know this. This is very simple and easy. But in order to get from here to here, there's a process, right? In order to get from the bed to the shower to the breakfast table, in the car to work, there's a whole, each thing is building upon the other thing. Well, this is the same thing, but only over the course of 12 months and not a 12-hour day, right? We plant a seed, we then water and grow that seed, we nurture it, we fertilize it, and then in the fall, it produces a result. So it's so easy to see how an hour and a minute says that's the time of day, and right there would be clues. If you didn't know how to tell time and you ask somebody, hey, what time is it? They might say it's 9 a.m. and we could fact check them. The sun would be more towards the east. If it's in the morning, the sun would be up. Usually by 9 a.m. in most places, the sun is up. If it's 9 p.m., usually in most places, the sun has set. We could fact check that, right? We could look outside, use our eyes and see, well, there's evidence to say that it's probably morning. The sun's not in the west. It's not setting. I did just wake up an hour ago. And, there's clues. Well, the same thing with a planet, right? A planet leaves clues. Saturn has to do with taking responsibility for your dreams. Okay, responsibility for whatever planet it's an aspect to. It's about economizing, which means getting rid of waste. You want to get rid of wasted energy. So just like how there's a time of day, there's a time and a season in your life for doing certain things. Most of the time, when there's a 90-degree aspect, which is half of 180, which would probably represent our harvest time, what's happening is there's tension. In order to find out what that tension is coming from and where it's coming from, we have to understand the two underlying things, just like we understand the hour hand and the minute hand. When we understand that Saturn has to do with getting rid of waste, and we understand that the sun is about the role that you play, your destiny in this lifetime, the role that you're going to take on in line with your spiritual point of view in order to fully express yourself. And it has to do with your vitality. So when Saturn is reaching its outer limits 90 degrees away before it starts heading towards the 180-degree point, what it's actually doing is it's producing a sort of tension that gets you to go back into yourself. When it was 30 degrees away, let's say 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock, you were building skills. When it was 60 degrees away, 10 o'clock, you were applying those skills. Other people saw it. They wanted in on it. They were like, wow, can you use your skills at planting seeds to help me grow my garden? And sometimes you get distracted from your own garden. You start to do that. And then the tension is produced because the sun has to do with your role, your destiny. All of a sudden there's tension because you don't realize where it's coming from. You feel oppressed. You're oppressed because you were supposed to be setting up structures that were healthy for your expression of your own skills and of your own desires and your own needs and what made you feel a sense of vitality, what brought energy into your life. And then as other people get involved at these later stages, when we're practicing our skills, so let's say you learned how to plant a garden and then you started to do it, people noticed, and then by 90 degrees, you're practicing this. But now, let's say you accidentally were practicing it for somebody else and you forgot that this is about you, right? The sun is the heart of your chart. So when we use words like responsibility, so where the hour hand represents hours, Saturn might represent economizing your life, meaning getting rid of wasted energy. The planet, the natal planet that it's aspecting, may be the energy that you're getting rid of. Now, let's show you just how unique this is by putting other suns on the map. Let's say somebody had their sun in Aquarius. Well, if the sun was at 0 degrees Aquarius, then we'd have to add another 60 degrees on top of this, and this would be 150 degrees away. That's called an inconjunct. So this is not 90 degrees. This is a different time. This person in their life is not at the same time as you, right? Their hour pointer and their minute pointer are not in the same area. Now, this is less obvious to people, but I'm trying to make it obvious through this content in this video. I'm trying to be very clear that if somebody had their sun in Capricorn, it would be 180 degrees. Somebody would be at harvest time, meaning they would have taken on and built structural roles that suited them up until this point. They would have then actualized a good deal of their destiny. And then what would happen is they would have become the person they needed to become. And then the waning half would be a fulfilling half of the cycle, meaning you would take the person that you became, the structure that you built for optimal self-expression with minimal to no waste, and then you'd apply that out in the world in such a way that was fulfilling to you and valuable to others. And where you can start to take advantage of your astrological chart is in understanding that this person whose sun is at 0 degrees Capricorn or 1 degree Capricorn is not in the same season as this person. Even though Saturn is over here still at 9 by transit, you're all experiencing a different season, a different part of that season. You're in an entirely different space entirely because you're on a waning cycle and they're on a waxing cycle. We're not even in the same hemisphere. And so this is how personal astrological timing affects you. And this is how easy it is to tell, is that it's not, you don't think of it like planets, you have to think of it like it's your own time. And so if your birth chart doesn't repeat for thousands of years, which it doesn't, and nobody else has your same birth chart, can you imagine thinking that it was spring in everybody's life at the exact same time? That for everybody, it was this tension point right here that you're going through is the same as this rapidly accelerating development at 120 degrees. If somebody had their sun over here, this would be a rapidly accelerating development of all the work that they put in, both for good and bad. You'd be at a tension point where you'd have to reorient back towards there. Now, there would be no tension if you were directly in line with this. You were eliminating waste pride. Now, there'd still be the elimination, but you'd be in flow. Flow would be your ability to see that. Now, I know our hourglass ran out, so I think I illustrated my point, and that's what I mean. There wouldn't be any tension for you if you were aware. My job as an astrologer is to make you conscious of this, not to overload you with astrological jargon, but to make it very plain and simple. Now, you don't need to understand this if you work with me, because I'll interpret this and tell you what season we're in, where in that season you are, and how to take advantage of it based on the factors involved.